Do you have trouble talking about your feelings? You're not alone. It's a topic that can make even the most powerful people somewhat squeamish. You're listening to FeelingsMatter, where our mission is to demystify everything about emotions so that we can all get more comfortable talking about them. Join Tina and Michelle every week as we unpack a new angle on emotions, drawing upon the science of the brain and the psychology of human nature.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to FeelingsMatter, brought to you by Mindful Appy. I'm Michelle Stinsner-Ross.
And I'm Tina Schweiger.
And today we are discussing vulnerable, the feeling of being vulnerable, and its relationship to psychological safety, particularly in the workplace. I am really pleased with how we framed this discussion as far as feeling vulnerable is concerned. That relates a lot to what Brene Brown discusses very frequently. That sense of, I might be risking something. I might be putting my reputation at risk. I might be putting my relationships at risk. I might be risking humiliation. I'm feeling vulnerable. But psychological safety, and particularly at work, gives us a place where we can safely take some of those risks. Tina, you want to leverage off of that?
Yeah, I think what you're describing is that psychological safety is the antidote to the weaknesses that we feel when we feel vulnerable. If we are in an environment that we feel comfortable speaking up and we know that we're not going to be punished for saying and speaking our mind, we're more willing to be vulnerable.
It also is key and critical to things like excellence, to driving good performance, because if you're not in an environment where you can bring up, hey, this doesn't seem right. Did we think this through, or is there another option? If you don't feel safe, if you don't feel comfortable in calling somebody else out, or just creating a moment where the rest of us can be teachable, can learn, we miss out on so many opportunities to do even better than we could have done.
Yes, I do. We were reviewing a video, a TED Talk from Amy Edmondson of Harvard Business School, and she discusses psychological safety. The examples that she gives are quite profound in the impact of not having psychological safety. For example, the example she gives of the hospital environment where a nurse is questioning the dose of a patient's medication, and she second guesses herself because she doesn't want to disrupt what's happening and disrupt the treatment. She doesn't feel safe, voicing her opinion about this dose looking too high for the patient. You can imagine how not having psychological safety in that environment could almost have dire consequences.
Absolutely, it could. Let's talk for just a minute about what it looks like and what it looks like when you don't have it. I've actually been in positions where I've both had it and not had it. One of the workplaces I was in, I had psychological safety when I first started working there because the first manager I worked with went out of his way to create it for his team. I was actually, even though I was doing marketing, I was actually working with the developer team, and the developers need to be able to work in a dynamic way and question coding and all that kind of stuff, or what they're trying to build is just not going to work. And the manager was really smart in the way that he enabled good communication to flow. So people were very able to question, to bring up their own ideas. And he was really good, particularly in one-on-ones, in asking people to provide insight and feedback and fill in gaps and things like that. What I didn't realize, because I started working with him first, was that that same psychological safety did not exist within the organization as a whole. My experience of the company culture based on my engagement and my work within that one team. Mm-hmm. After a while, I got reshuffled and was put under a different manager. Mm-hmm. And oh my goodness, did that make a huge difference.
What was the difference like?
The difference was like, not only did I very frequently feel like the manager was making me feel stupid, and he would say things that, and it wasn't just me, it was our entire team. All of us had moments where he questioned us, made us feel like we were idiots, and our ability to safely feel like we could give feedback, give suggestions, all that kind of stuff just completely went away. And to be honest with you, there was something seriously off about that guy, and I would have panic attacks.
Wow.
I would go into the one-on-one meetings with him. And it wasn't that he was like sexually harassing me or giving me that weird guy vibe, but at the same time, there was something very, very off. And I was very reactive to it, to the point that I hated doing one-on-ones with him in particular.
Wow, that's really tough. That anxiety that you felt, that's exactly the quadrant that Amy Edmondson describes as the anxiety zone. When you have all the focus is on accountability, so-called holding people's feet to the fire to make sure that they perform well with the job at the expense of psychological safety. And those two things almost feel like they're on the same continuum, but she describes it as two different dimensions. But when you do plot them X against Y, sort of scientifically, you end up with that anxiety zone where it's all accountability, no safety. When you do have all psychological safety and no accountability, you end up with complacency or low performance, or you risk low performance. And then if you can get both of those right, where you hold accountable just enough and you are psychologically safe at the same time, without sacrificing accountability, without just chalking it up to allowing people to whine or being too nice, you can actually get into the learning zone where you really fuel high performance and you fuel a continuous learning environment where there's continuous improvement and growth. And that is what attracts and retains those A players. They really want to be challenged. They want to learn and they want to grow all the time. That's why they're A players. They're lifelong learners.
Right.
But put them in the anxiety quadrant and they'll quickly drop off and you can lose them.
In group dynamics, that idea of groupthink, that all of a sudden, the blinders just go on and we only do what we've always done, that exists because there is no psychological safety. Nobody feels safe or okay to speak up and go, wait a second, why are we doing this way?
Yeah. One missing element was the concept that there's a huge power dynamic that needs to be acknowledged. When you're a manager or when there's this hierarchy that we've established in companies, and those hierarchies create a power dynamic that can make people quite uncomfortable. You're literally holding the purse strings of somebody's life. Right. Their ability to pay their next mortgage is hinging on their job performance or that one-on-one with you if you're the manager over them. So just simply acknowledging that power dynamic that you have over people that you manage if you're a manager is critical. And then you can start thinking about psychological safety and do I have it? If I don't have it, how can I create it?
Power dynamic is also critical to creating and maintaining it, right? Because the average worker, whoever has to report up to somebody else, they are not in a position, due to lack of power, to create the psychological safety necessary to do their job. They're dependent upon their manager, their supervisor, their whoever, to make sure that it's articulated that, hey, it's okay. I want feedback and I need feedback. And this whole team benefits from people speaking up and giving us suggestions and thinking a little outside the box. And oh my God, did I actually just... But it's true. As cliche as saying something like that is, it's only when a manager, a supervisor, somebody that has that power can actually establish the culture of psychological safety.
It relates to diversity and inclusion. It's inclusive to invite a diverse set of viewpoints. when you do invite those into your business, your day-to-day operations, you're going to find more innovation within the company. And if you don't invite that, you're going to miss out on all those great viewpoints.
Before you can have any of that, you've got to have an atmosphere where it's okay to be creative and innovative, right?
Yeah, that's a really great point, Michelle. It does. You're actually right. That's a kind of an epiphany in the moment. I think I've spent most of my career leading design teams to create solutions for companies and working with executive teams to really hone down positioning and things like what's on the homepage of your website, what should that logo look like? And in order to do that, when I work with the executive team, you need to have everyone's buy-in. So what I did resort to was actually wonderful, was resorting to design thinking and breaking the normal communication down into creative communication and collaboration, where instead of having one person kind of rule and just drive the meeting and everybody else be silent, you actually prevent that from happening, and you create this democratic, collaborative environment where every person draws out their solutions and puts them all up, and you can see them all at once. That encourages safety, encourages people to be vulnerable, and it can break down some of those railroading tactics that environments without psychological safety will employ to make sure that a person gets to maintain the control and accountability they want to have with the business.
Support for this podcast comes from Mindful Appy. Your feelings matter and Mindful Appy can prove it. Try it out for free right now. Grab your phone and text the emoji that best represents how you feel to 972-778-6835. See how your feelings compare with other listeners of the Feelings Matter podcast. Again, text the emoji to 972-778-6835. And now back to the conversation with Tina and Michelle.
How do companies, teams, how do the groups themselves benefit from creating an environment of psychological safety? What's the payoff? What's the benefit here?
Retention. People, again, when they have that learning environment and they do feel challenged and they do feel they have the ability to question the status quo, that they don't have to retreat into a shell of safety of just putting the blinders on, as you said, and keeping my head down and just doing my job because they may be punished. Think about the anxiety that you just described, and being the Feelings Matter podcast, what is the feeling that's underneath anxiety? It's fear. And if you do think that one step down underneath that is fear, it's one of those more intense emotions. It's one of those more contagious emotions. So these things can quickly devolve into people creating their own stories around why there's no safety or why a certain thing is a certain way, or encouraging others, hey, keep your head down and you'll do just fine in this company. If you speak up, you're going to get punished. You're not going to last long. And you create a culture of everybody keeping their heads down. So that the consequence of that is you're not going to have very great retention. You're going to miss out on key innovation opportunities. And ultimately, it doesn't seem like it's trackable to the business ROI. It almost seems too soft and fluffy, but it does impact the bottom line. Absolutely.
Well, when you think about how dealing with mistakes, dealing with opportunities to change something, to do something a bit better, you are absolutely talking about how to improve productivity, improve performance, raise the level of excellence. You cannot raise the level of excellence unless you're able to question the status quo.
Yeah, and you can't even call out mistakes. And how much do mistakes cost? Everybody makes them. Companies make them. I remember way back when I started my career as a graphic designer in an in-house ad agency, and it was back in the days before the internet, we would create print ads, and a print ad was printed with the wrong price. And the entire department was gathered into the room, and the director over the department of probably at least 40 or 50 people just berated the entire department for this one error. How willing do you think anyone would be there to point out a mistake if they think that the whole department is going to be berated. I mean, it's almost a situation where the punishment that they doled out just worsened the problem.
Certainly it did.
Yeah.
Well, and I've been in marketing agencies where we've lost clients because of a massive mistake that nobody was willing to go, wait a second, are we sure we want to do that? Because accountability also breaks down when there's no psychological safety, because nobody's willing to say, wait a sec, this landing page doesn't seem to be working right. Or did you guys realize we have a bunch of broken links across the website? Those are all things that they're small. But if you let them pile up with no accountability because nobody wants to call it out, question it, get a little verification, then those things pile up and you wind up costing business. Yes, it does affect the bottom line. It creates conversion where you wind up having turnover, all that kind of stuff. Yes.
You know, Michelle, you mentioned earlier the story that when you moved from one manager to another, you went from an environment of having psychological safety to one where it was dramatically different. And you really did put those blinders on and you retreated into anxiety. One thing I wanted to mention, when you go from one environment to another and you can see how dramatically different it is, I wonder, if we do have any HR managers or senior executives listening, you may be thinking, well, how do I know which departments have psychological safety, which managers are doing a good job of encouraging this and which managers are not? You may be able to deduce it from looking at the metrics and the performance. You also, this is one of the main reasons why we created Mindful Appy the way we did. We want to give the employees who are suffering in these teams without psychological safety the ability to express that safely, because we don't let anyone see individual results from the pings that we send out to say, how are you feeling today? If they come back with fear or anger, nobody can ever see that. And we don't show results until there's a minimum of 6 people reporting their feelings. As a senior leader or an HR executive in a company, you can use this kind of a tool that can quickly, on a day-to-day basis, give you a sense of who's experiencing psychological safety in their team and who's not experiencing psychological safety in their team, simply by looking at their NEI score and seeing which teams have a higher NEI score, which teams have a lower NEI score. When you really look at those quadrant breakdowns that Amy Edmondson puts up of the accountability on psychological safety quadrants, those are emotion driven. When you have anxiety in that lower right-hand quadrant, that's fear and that's an emotion. So that's why it's really important to track how people are feeling on a day-to-day basis and doing so in a way that retains their safety. When we do roll these programs out within companies, there's an extensive amount of education and campaigning that needs to be done on an internal basis to actually get people to trust that it is actually anonymous for real. Honestly and truly, it is anonymous. It's not just we're saying it's anonymous and somebody's going to peel back the layers and find out that you sent the middle finger that day. No, it really is. Nobody can see it. All that is reported as a single number.
Anonymity in this case is important to allowing somebody to express an emotion without the risk of punishment, right? Mm-hmm. That whole aspect of I'm going to be called out and possibly put on report or something because of the way I feel about this situation. That anonymity makes sure that I know that I can express, or anybody using Mindful Appy can express how they feel without the fear of that punishment, right?
Yeah, there's incredible motivation. It's very difficult to know which teams have psychological safety and which ones don't. The blinders that people have on and the ability for managers to manage up effectively obfuscates. The power dynamic goes both ways. It goes up the chain as well. So the interest and the motivation on managers is to insinuate and to show the performance and to show the numbers, but maybe obfuscate what may be really going on a day-to-day basis that is injurious to the company.
Wouldn't you also say that this system in kind of that microcosm sort of way is the tool that can begin to help managers and help companies and help HR departments create that psychological safety necessary to really grow and become much more effective as a company, much more viable as a growing business concern. That taking that first step to just create a system that people can ask, how are you doing? And know that the response can come in without retribution. That's kind of the first step to creating psychological safety.
It's a way to jump over the layers of management that are necessary in these large global organizations to have a link between the leadership of the company and the frontline workers who are working with customers on a day-to-day basis. How can you jump over all of those layers of management, have a one-on-one communication with employees and truly understand how they feel? I believe it's empowering for the employees to be able to express how they feel and send up a signal, empower them to speak up directly to the leadership of the company without, having their manager come down on them and finding some reason to fire them. I mean, you have no idea what goes on.
And I love it that you said that in this moment, because my mind was turning to the next question as to how do employees benefit from psychological safety? And you're beginning to give us that hint already.
Well, I mean, staying out of the anxiety zone is excellent for mental health. Feeling safe to voice your feelings, to voice your opinions on how to make things better or even to avoid mistakes is healthy. It's healthy in a relationship, in interpersonal relationships, and it's healthy in a business relationship.
Just knowing that my coworkers, the people that are around me all the time, trust the years of experience, and I have some confidence in my own instincts at this point. I've been doing this long enough. I should be confident in my instincts, but part of that confidence comes from being in an environment where I am psychologically safe. The converse of that is I begin to have less and less confidence in my instincts when I'm constantly told, let's not even go there. Every time I get shut down, when I'm acting on my instinct based on experience and what I've seen before, and the fact that as an empath, I pay attention to the feelings and communications around me, that I pay attention to how our customers, our audience, whatever, as a marketer, I pay attention to what kind of feedback I'm getting from our advertising campaigns and other things. All of that gets fed into where I want to go next as a professional, and have that shut down by everybody else that I'm working with. It's soul crushing.
It is soul crushing. We shouldn't even be doing it. Why, who wants to do that?
No, and it's funny, one of the things that Amy Edmondson was talking about in a TED Talk is really none of us get up in the morning and bound out of bed going, I'm excited to be humiliated. And I was like, no.
Disruptive, intrusive, be the negative Nelly. I want to get up and I want to buck the system. Nobody really gets up and gets excited to do that.
No, absolutely not. But at the same time, do I want to disrupt it when we've gotten into a pattern that's ineffective? Yeah, I would hope I have the ability to do that. That when an experiment, something that we tested, didn't turn out the way we wanted it to, I wanted to have the freedom to go, yeah, that didn't quite work out as planned. Let's try something else.
And I think I could close us out with getting back to one of the things to do in one of our previous podcasts that we said, which was the open-ended question. Mm-hmm. That is to encourage psychological safety, to encourage people to speak up. Ask an open-ended question. Stop talking, make eye contact, and listen to the answer. It's really quite that simple. Try it and you'll be amazed.
That, and just being clear. Don't assume that your team knows that you're open to their commentary. It's almost something that you have to do on a daily basis to communicate and say, I can hear from you. I love that. My own blind spots. I need your insight. I need your input. we are better when I hear from you.
Yeah, that was a perfect how to create psychological safety advice, which was to create your initiatives with the spirit of experimenting and learning and voicing the fact that we're going down a new road. We've not been down this road before. Everyone needs to be on alert, and we need to hear from everyone. Everyone's eyes and ears need to be peeled and look for opportunities for improvement or avoiding mistakes or just in general how to work better.
Mm-hmm. Tina Schweiger, thank you so much. This was your idea to talk about this today, and I'm so glad that we did.
It's part of my crusade, Michelle. It's like the underdog. I've always been for the underdog, and anything that I can do for the world to help people who don't have a voice have a voice